Hey everyone, this is Mason Hutchison and welcome back to HerbRally, your daily herbal podcast. We come out with new episodes about 5 days a week, so be sure to tune in often. Our goal for the show is to help you along your herbalist journey no matter what stage you're at. We have over 604 episodes, so feel free to peruse those episodes and you're bound to find something of interest. Sitting in the back of my truck here in Eugene, Oregon, and it's raining like crazy, so perhaps you could hear that in the background. Probably not too distracting. It's probably quite nice, actually. Today's episode is with frequent HerbRally contributor, my good friend, Heather Irvine. And this is a answer to a question that was asked in our HerbRally Schoolhouse membership area. One of the perks, I don't talk about this very much, but one of the perks of being an HerbRally Schoolhouse member is we have a form in the member area where you could fill out and basically ask an herbalist a question. And then it's my job to go out and hopefully get that question answered. We're not going to be able to answer every single question, just depending on the severity of it or if the herbalist might need more specifics. But I approached Heather with this question and she felt qualified to answer it and kind of give, not necessarily vague recommendations, but overarching just general things to think about. I thought she approached it in a very holistic way and gave some really good advice and different things to think about when you are trying to help out a teenager or really anybody that might have anxiety and or insomnia. So the question specifically was, do you know any herbalists that work with teens who have social anxiety and struggle to fall asleep? Like I said, I think Heather gave a really well-rounded answer to this, and hopefully you get some takeaways. You can watch the video to this episode if you like. It's on our YouTube channel. I'll leave a link to that in the show notes. If you want to leave your feedback as a comment on the video, please leave a comment and a thumbs up. And we just hit over 3,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. So we've been releasing anywhere from 1 to 3 to 5 new herbalism videos each week. So if you're not subscribed to us on YouTube yet, please consider doing so. Also, before we get into the show, I want to read yet another Apple Podcast written review, and this is a 5-star review left by Roxanne O. And Roxanne says, "Great show with plenty of info for anyone who loves plants and loves learning as much as possible about them. Especially appreciate Mason telling us about the wonderful events that are lined up. Thanks." So that's really great feedback, Roxanne. Thank you. Also, really nice to know that you like the event updates on the podcast. Sometimes I wonder if people actually enjoy those. From time to time, I'll do solo episodes and just kind of shout out what's happening in the herbal community. And it's nice to know that Roxanne appreciates that, and I'm sure there's others out there as well that like the event episodes as well. Speaking of which, we do have a webinar coming up with Erika Galentin, also for our HerbRally Schoolhouse members. It's called The Business of Clinical Herbal Practice, and basically she just goes over all the ins and outs of what you need to know in order to be a clinical herbalist from the business side of things. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that, I'll leave a link to that in the show notes as well. That's coming up on May 20th. It's going to be a Zoom webinar where you get to interact and ask questions and whatnot. It's a 2-hour interview. So Erika Galentin is the one hosting it, and she's super knowledgeable on the topic. I did want to mention, going back to kind of the Apple Podcast review stuff, that's actually the last Apple Podcast review that I've read over the course of the years now. And now I'm all out of reviews to read. There are some from other apps that I'll probably read in the future. If you have a moment and you use Apple Podcasts and you have not left a written review, it really helps out the show a lot. So if you have a few seconds to go over to Apple Podcasts, leave some sort of 5-star ranking or any star ranking for that matter, along with a written review, it'd really help us out a lot. So thanks so much to all of you that left a review, and thanks to those of you in the future who will do so. So that's going to do it for me today. I will talk to you very soon. Hope you enjoyed today's episode with Heather Irvine. Oh, also wanted to, before we get into the show, Heather has a audio project. It's not necessarily a podcast, but it's called Soundwise for Medicinal Plants. I just wanted to put that out there. I'll leave a link to her audio project in the show notes as well. Since you're an audio listener, a podcast listener, you might enjoy what she's up to. And if you've been a podcast listener for years now, you'll have likely heard many a Heather Irvine episode on the HerbRally podcast. So, all right, that's really going to do it for me today. I'll talk to you soon. Take care. A little bit of housekeeping before we get into the show. The content in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to cure, diagnose, treat, or prevent any disease. This information has not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. We are not doctors, nor do we play one on the internet. Please seek advice from a qualified healthcare professional. Okay, MC Calico, take it away.
Yeah. Smoking herbal blends. We need some Mullen and some Kush, my brethren. While listening to HerbRally podcast again. Herbalism at its finest with Mason Hutchinson. Yeah.
Hi Herbalists, my name is Heather Irvine and I am often involved with HerbRally as a contributor, and I'll give you a little bit of background. So my first real deep learning of herbalism was in the Northeast School of Botanical Medicine, studying with Seven Song in Ithaca, New York, and I live in Ithaca, New York again. After that, I worked in more or less agroforestry research, growing ginseng in the woods in New York State, a very outdoors and somewhat casual internship. But basically from that point on, I looked to both continue my education via Cornell University, which is where I went to college, and also look for work and service that would be both aligned with a background in ecology, or what we called natural resources, a real old term for, a dated term I should say, for more or less conservation, and also, make a living and also continue my exposure to medicinal plants and actually using them, learning how to use them, working with people with medicinal plants. And after some time working in natural resources in New York State, I then went to the Vermont Center for Integrative Herbalism, the very first year that they were open with a physical school and clinic, and studied with Larkin Bunce, Betsy Bancroft, and Guido Massé, and my classmates and guest teachers for 2 years. It was a 3-year program, but they let a small handful of us start as year 2s. And that was a real clinical experience, meaning we were learning from people who had clients actively, who had a period, a good period of time that they'd been working with clients, and who would also learn from people who work with clients. And then we would bring in our own clients, people who we recruited from the community. I literally used to go sit in a coffee shop with some of my herbal textbooks and do my homework there, and sort of attract people who might have questions, and then kind of encourage them to consider coming into clinic. We'll pause for geese. There's another set of geese. Three sets of geese. Okay, so as I was saying, I learned with people who, at least to some capacity and in some point in their life, had real clinical practice, and then we also brought clients in. And not only were we bringing in clients, we were supervised by our instructors. Basically while interacting with the client and while coming up with a plan for them, information about herbs and supplements to deliver, to them, to deliver the information to them. And one of the things I had the great fortune of doing, sort of segueing from that time or overlapping, is so I was already quite a prolific tincture maker, based on my work at the Northeast School of Botanical Medicine at Seven Song School, and also had a pretty good foundation, a really good foundation for identifying plants, not only learning it in my youth, but also being required to be able to do that in my college course of studies. So I had made a huge number of tinctures, and one of the teachers suggested that I might like to take his spot in the farmer's market in the community where he was going to be withdrawing from that year. So I did that, and I had a farmer's market stand selling my own, mostly tinctures, about 200 to 300 types, for 10 years. Nearly every single Saturday of the year, interacting with customers, giving the sort of, quickest or the most thorough possible table conversation. So sometimes people would come, week after week, and sometimes it would be a one-time conversation, and sometimes people would be interested in and would come to clinic, which was great as well. So I also worked with a naturopathic doctor for 3 years as an employee. So not necessarily in the clinic room with the patients, but a lot of communication with the patients, with the doctor, and a lot of interaction with the apothecary, which I managed and did, pour the tinctures that the physician formulated, as well as sometimes contribute to that apothecary, with simple tinctures that I had created. So there is more to my story, but that I think gets us to the point that we need, which is the Ask an Herbalist question about teen anxiety, teen social anxiety, and my favorite topic, insomnia. The question was phrased, trouble falling asleep. And most of us, or some of us herbalists, self-included, will often be wary to answer sort of a case question in this sort of format. But then we sometimes see one that's general enough or agreeable enough to us personally that, we say, give me that one. So teen social anxiety, and teen trouble falling asleep, which is, more specific than just saying insomnia. I'm going to focus on the insomnia part, the trouble falling asleep part. That was me as a teen. That was me and how I came to botanical medicine, or came to herbalism. I would sometimes have nights, and occasionally still do, that I would not fall asleep until 5 in the morning. But having gone to bed, let's say 11:30, midnight, 1, 2, could be anywhere in that range, but would not fall asleep until maybe 4 or 5 in the morning, or would have lengthy, many hours of insomnia. And so that is a problem, especially of teens, who we usually require waking early, and require pretty demanding schedules of some teens. So I wouldn't have probably described myself as entirely anxious, although I probably was. I wasn't a heavy caffeine user really at all. Sometimes a little. What was going on? I didn't have a lot of serious family or social stress or academic stress. So what was going on? So I believe that teens, for one, have a lot of capacity for physicality, have a degree of need for, making and feeling endorphins, and can use some assistance or support with things like what we call sleep hygiene. It's a weird term, and supporting circadian rhythms. We actually know, or current wisdom is, that teens are not necessarily sort of circadian rhythm biologically at ease with waking up super early in the morning or with going to bed early. Teens socially and physically tend to have a propensity to stay up late. Teens also have an active mind and imagination and rumination, some teens, about their day or their hopes or their plans, or what they're not allowed to do, the expectations on them, or things that they need to meet in their schedule, etc. So I think, for one, since we're going to be a little holistic, is really a lot of physical activity could be helpful, or just some more. It's all relative, right? If someone is an athlete, then perhaps increasing their physical activity is not going to be helpful. If they're athlete already. If someone's mobility is limited, this isn't maybe as happy of an answer for them, but maybe there is some more exertion they can do, either physically relative to what they're already doing, or perhaps it's more sort of some additional mental or social, or hobby engaged exertion that they're doing with their mind, so that teens aren't bored at the end of the day and restless. So that's one. And that's one. There is also, I think, for teens, a possibility of being perhaps too physically overwrought and then tense at the end of the day. So some of my worst insomnia was when I was summer times, and still is. And so with that, I have to think about, well, yes, there's noise. If you're keeping windows open, there's more stimulation. There's perhaps more social stimulation, or perhaps more longing for social engagement, actual interaction. But also we have electrolyte balance. So if someone's an athlete or is, exerting themselves, or they're just working or are playing or being in the heat or in the sun, electrolytes are a piece to consider. All people, but especially kids and teens, feel in their mind kind of how they feel in their body to an extent. So one real simple electrolyte way to go, or I like to keep things simple as far as the things someone's going to be taking. Magnesium. Electrolytes, like a complete kind of electrolyte package or electrolyte product, is a good idea, yes. But if I can only choose one for this issue of restlessness and anxiety and trouble falling asleep, magnesium is one. Magnesium helps relax muscles, smooth muscles as well. So you're going to want to mind that someone's not adding so much magnesium in like a powder or supplement form that it loosens their bowels to a surprising amount. But magnesium, whether that's from leafy greens or from a supplement, I like to keep on hand a powdered magnesium supplement that basically you put in water. It makes a fizzy water that's pretty enjoyable, and it relaxes muscles, both skeletal and smooth muscles. So for someone who's a little bit, they might not even realize it, but they're a little more tense in their body, and that's keeping them from crossing that threshold into sleep, magnesium could be helpful. For a person who's experiencing menstrual cramps, or maybe they don't even realize that they're easing into, they're in their week before a menstrual period, and they're starting to feel a little more tension in their body, and it just sort of ratchets up slowly, and you don't even really know why. You might not even realize that you feel on edge, tense, etc. And yet again, magnesium can be helpful.
Hey everyone, it's Mason. Just a quick interruption from the show to let you know about our 13 herbal freebies. If you go to HerbRally.com, on the navigation bar at the top of the page, you'll see a button that says Freebies. Just click there and you'll sign up for our email newsletter. And in exchange, we're offering 13 herbal freebies. That's ebooks, webinars, videos, downloadable audio, and discounts to cool herbal companies. So if you'd like to check out these freebies, as well as sign up for our email newsletter, we update you about current events, new monographs, new videos, etc. Just go to HerbRally.com and click on the button at the top of the page that simply says Freebies. Okay, that's it from me. Now back to the show.
Okay, so the other thing that I'm really think is almost like if I had to give a one answer for many teens herbally, is valerian. I love valerian. So valerian, I think of more for young people than for older people, because there are some for whom valerian does not work well for. If a person is on medications for depression or anxiety, it may or may not sort of go together well with their medications. So that is a more advanced and specific kind of conversation that I'm not suggesting you learn through this. Maybe another conversation we can do that, but I also would suggest you're not imagining that you're training yourself on those things via YouTube videos. Okay, so but for a teen No other medications, no really outlier, mental or psychological diagnoses. Valerian can be a nice soother and relaxant to help someone cross that threshold to sleep mentally and physically. Especially for the person who has trouble, with lengthy insomnia. For someone who lays down and their body is tense once they've laid down, then this is a great specific indication for valerian. For someone who lays down or is getting ready for bed and they have thoughts going through their mind for, an hour or hours, this is also a specific indication for valerian. And I'm not just repeating these from sources before me. It is the very first plant I learned, but I had also used it in this way personally. And so when I learned this specific indication, it really impressed upon me the relevance of some of these specific indications and the relevance of valerian. So this is not just a sample size one. When working in clinic, but also when selling tinctures, I found that oftentimes usually if teens approached me at my booth, it was for trouble falling asleep. And so for many, many teens, I had recommended trying a little bit of this herb. And for many, many teens, it seemed to be helpful. For some adults that I've recommended it to, it has been very helpful. And I continue to use it when I need something more like one use or occasional use as needed, let's say. But also, I've found that some adults have a paradoxical or opposite response. And we actually kind of know why that is. So we know that there are constituents in valerian that are relaxant overall in the fresh root. The root is the part used. But we also know that when dried, and especially if dried in a way that's maybe, too hot, or there's or the conditions change, like it's hot and then wet and then dry and then wet again, or if the plant material, if the root is very, very old and has just had lots of repeated exposure to oxidation, then a constituent type forms called baldrinols. And baldrinols aren't going to be a big deal to many people, but for some they can be a little bit excitatory. And so some people pick up on those excitatory compounds a bit more so than others. And so this is, to me, the perfect rationale for why some people respond in the opposite way desired to valerian. Okay? Most it can work well for. If someone presents as super, super anxious, like anxious in a way that they're very young and putting their energy out, and maybe they're it feels as if they're almost going to lift off the ground. A lot of times these super anxious types could also be very thin. They're just always, exerting and not quite, settled, and is not maybe their natural state or their easiest state to attain. That's perhaps not a valerian person, or it's perhaps, I would suggest that presentation may have a slightly greater chance of having an adverse effect to valerian. But, you might notice from me, my body looks a little tense. I'm also kind of in a cold environment here, but, I'm not presenting super young or super aggressive. And so for a person who generally presents a little bit more, not subdued, but perhaps grounded or passive perhaps, but also can be a bit tweaked at times and tense and sleepless, valerian can be really great. So what's going on with the physiology? So we'll say a few things about that. We know that valerian, I mentioned, or we talked about magnesium relaxing muscles. So valerian also seems to relax muscles to an extent, and smooth muscles as well. Blood vessels, slightly. You're not going to create a hypotensive effect in a person. I have just about the lowest blood pressure generally of anyone I know. And I've not had an issue with it, although using a lot could maybe make someone feel, a teensy bit like they want to lay down and rest, which is usually the desired effect. But is a little bit of a muscle relaxant, skeletal and smooth muscle. So we see two things. The skeletal muscle relaxant part is probably pretty apparent why that's a benefit. The smooth muscle relaxant, a person may experience a little bit, if a person's sort of clammy and tensed up, cold hands and feet, that's another specific indication for valerian, then this could be a great match for this person as well. It just opens up the vasculature a little bit at the periphery, helping a person feel a little bit warmer, more at ease. Or if it's hot weather, just can help with temperature regulation a little bit, help a person feel a bit more at ease. And so that's a positive. If we're trying to find like mechanisms and neurotransmitters, well, with herbs, it's complicated. Herbs are not just one constituent, and they're not just one action. But, some research suggests some effects on GABA receptors, okay? Not that valerian contains GABA, or even that it's increasing it, but that there's, the effect on a person's sort of affect, feeling, presentation, physiology would be perhaps, a bit like slightly increasing GABA, which is a neurotransmitter that's generally promoting calm. So we like that for this use. Okay, so how would one use it? I like it as a tincture because it tastes terrible. Actually, I like the taste of it, but it can be used as a tincture or extract, simply because it's a bit easier than administering a tea, which is okay, but can be strong and earthy and even a bit cheesy. It has a very unusual scent and flavor that travels, aromatic, but not necessarily pleasant. So I like to use it as a tincture because then it's a quick administration. You can use 1 milliliter, 2 milliliter, 3 milliliter of tincture. And also because of the ease of use when someone's looking for support with sleep. I would not have somebody at the point that they realize they might be having a little bit of difficulty falling asleep, want to get up and be super engaged in something physical or a task to do. So when I would have trouble sleeping and when I travel still, I sometimes take a 1 ounce tincture of valerian and have it right by my bed. So it's super easy, and you don't overthink it. You just use it when you think you might need it, and you can repeat it if you think you might need a little bit more. It's not necessarily ideal to take close to the time that you would need to wake up. Like if you have to wake up in 90 minutes and have your whole day, then perhaps coffee is going to be a better remedy for you that day than valerian. But for nighttime, even if it's pretty late at night, I find it very helpful and very comforting to have something that you feel you can do that has been helpful for you in the past. For social anxiety, that was part of the question, I would maybe not make a super big deal of it. I'm not a behavioral health specialist, but I wouldn't put too much emphasis on it for a teen, because teens are dynamic and changing people, and people can be not good at school as a teen and good at school later. People can be socially awkward as a teen and then develop their skills and comfortability pretty rapidly after, or eventually and when they need to after. But I would also perhaps consider ways that teens can be social that are physical or that are kind of planned group activities perhaps. Or alternately, for some teens, just 1 or 2 close friends is going to be more comfortable for them and still help with their social development and interactions. And it's just a progression, it's just things in teen life will work out gradually. And I would encourage parents not to try to help, solve, fix, monitor, analyze a teen too much in this regard. And I would also not have parents try to force a lot of supplements or essential oils or a massage or any kind of alternative care onto teens, because if a teen doesn't want to do it, I mean, some of you may have really good rapport with your teens and they like the alternative stuff, and think that, their parent really is very smart about these things and trust them. But for a lot of teens, they're just going to go into like donkey pose, if the parent says do it. So I would just keep it simple to things that they can sort of self-select when they find they want a helper, like for sleep. Maybe valerian isn't for everyone. There are some other a little bit more versatile herbs. Skullcap is one. It sounds scary, but I think that it's really not, and I have found that it's really not, and I have worked with teens with it, and I worked with teens on medications with it. Passion flower is a possibility. If someone's very, 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 very psychically sensitive, and or if they're on medications, even though passion flower is pretty gentle, it is what we call a little bit of a hypnotic. So, some people might have a little bit more colorful experiences with it and more vivid dreaming with it. So it's something to consider. It's not. This is not a guarantee of positive effects, and positive effects for every person across the board. Those are 3 of my favorites. For sleep, I have also worked a lot with California poppy, but more often for adults who wake up in the night. So maybe that'll be another Ask an Herbalist. I feel like the sun's going down. We've had a lot of pedestrians. I'm starting to get the chills. But let's see, other sleep hygiene items. So enough exercise during the day. Not trying to administer some sort of doctrine of what they ought to be doing to the teen. Not a real complicated regimen. Making sure that a teen is getting enough magnesium. Hydration as well. That's another one. Hydration. And during the day. Also recognizing that a teen might not be able to fall asleep as early as you want them to, and to have as much grace as you can in mornings. So like an extra 10 minutes of sleep for a teen might be difference making. And if a teen is, sent to bed at 10:30 or 11 or 11:30, but their body isn't going to go into sleep mode until an hour later, that restlessness time and that being forced could also keep them sleepless actually 2 or 3 times longer than if they had just stayed up sort of to the point that they had some moments to kind of disconnect and defrag from their day. I remember having as a teen a peer who said no matter how busy his that he stayed up because his days were so full that he felt like he needed to have a little bit of time to himself, to his own hobby or interest at the end of the day. And I relate to that as an adult too. Okay, Herbalist, the battery went out for the cold temperature, but I think you get the idea. Physical activity, electrolytes, magnesium. Valerian can be a great option for many teens to use just as needed at bedtime if they find that they're having trouble falling asleep. Not necessarily every night, and not necessarily with all medications or with all diseases either. And that having some time and space to sort of deprogram, defrag, disconnect from one's day and process and settle can be good for teens and for anyone. Okay, thanks, Herbalists.
And that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the HerbRally podcast. If you'd like to hear more from us here at HerbRally, we now have a text message community, believe it or not. Basically, it's just updates from us. We send about 1 to 7 texts per week, notifying you about new events, videos, courses, podcasts. You get the idea. It's pretty much like our email newsletter, just in text form. So if you'd like to receive text messages from HerbRally, just text JOIN, that's JOIN, to the number 541-256-2895. Again, that's JOIN to number 541-256-2895. And to stop receiving texts, that's easy too. Just text STOP to the same number. It'll opt you out immediately. Okay, thanks again for listening. Have a great rest of your day.